Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Sunday Night Live, your favorite automotive show where we talk about all things automotive, variable ops, fixed ops, you name it. If it has to do with the dealership, we talk about it and we bring in the experts to talk about and share with what they do. Now tonight is kind of a treat because what we're going to be talking about, what we're going to learn from Peter is that it transcends way beyond just our business. Yes, it fits every part of our business. Yes, whether it's the front, the back, the middle, doesn't really matter. But it also works in your daily life in pretty much anything you want to achieve. So I want to welcome Peter Collins to the show. Welcome.
Hi, Paul. Hi, people. Nice to be here.
All the way from Sydney, Australia. So we appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you, and then we'll kind of jump into it.
I've been in sales coming up to 60 years in the middle of next year. And most of that time, I've exceeded everything that I've wanted to. Even as a kid, I started selling just before I was 15 years old. And by the time I'm 18, I'm selling up a storm, and I've learned a lot about the selling process. And I drive into my father's driveway. I'm still living at home at 18 years old with a Jaguar Mark II 1960, and the year is 1964. So at the age of 18, I can afford a 4-year-old Jaguar. My father comes flying out of the house saying, I don't know where you borrowed this car from, but you better take it out of here because I don't want my friends asking me why I'm making so much money. He said, Dad, it's not going to go out in the street. It's my car. And he said, what do you do for a living again? And I had to tell him, I'm in the sales industry. He, at that stage, was a leading hand with the same company he'd been working for 20 years and wasn't earning 1/3 or 1/4 of what I was doing week to week. So that's my introduction to selling. And I want to share why I got to that level. In those days, I didn't understand very much about goal setting. And it wasn't until about 15 years later till I was given some revelations on goal setting that completely changed my life. And let me just say, at that particular point, I was then promoted to a state manager of the Yellow Pages. So we're not talking about a small company. We're talking about something worldwide. And I grew a state telephone directory at 40% per annum. Now, most of the world was increasing revenue on last year at the rate of 3 and 4%. Here in Australia, we were doing a lot better, and we were doing between 8 and 12% during that period of time. And here I am writing revenues at 40% on the previous year. Now, I did it one time based on understanding how to work with goals. I got everybody else in my team behind me in such a way that we hit that 40% target the following year. By then, it was no longer a fluke. This guy might understand what he's doing. My managing director or CEO at that stage encouraged me to keep on improving on that score. So I set another goal at 40% revenue increase on the previous year. I did that 3 years in a row.
Wow.
It broke all sorts of world records with a multinational to start with, and a corporate one to boot, but it put me into the Hall of Fame twice in that company. Wow. In that period of time. So can you understand with that background how much people can benefit from what I want to share? And the first thing I want to share is with goal setting, it's no different to anything else in life, no different to a business plan. Put the work in and you will get the results. Don't put the work in, then you can complain about the results you didn't get. And most people say, yep, I'm setting a goal. They write it down on the 1st of January. By the 14th or 15th of January, they forgot that it exists unless their partner or somebody else asks them, like the sales manager, what happened to your goal? I've got it, and they can show it to them. Guess what? They've never read it. They've never understood it. They've never used it as a plan. And then they wonder why their goal doesn't work. Another thing.
Jump in here. If I can jump in here for a second. We all say we have goals, we think we have goals, and we say, you know what, I want to do this by such and such date. Oh, no, we don't even say by such and such date. We say, this is what we want to accomplish. And in our minds, that's our goal. My wife reminded me that, you know, I shared with you guys that I had ballooned up to a portly 235 pounds. And I said to myself, my goal is I'm going to hit 200 pounds. I'm going to hit it, you know, within a certain amount of time. I wasn't sure how long it would take. So I had a goal in my mind, but I didn't really formulate it in any kind of scientific way, which Peter's going to share with us. And the thing that was in my mind kind of became action steps when I got the Fitbit, and I now had a plan specifically what steps I needed to take. And I'm 21 pounds into 35-pound weight loss. I will hit the rest of it by December 31st, guaranteed, because now I have a little bit better understanding of what Peter and I were talking about a little bit before the show started. So I'm really excited because you are all in the same position as me and everybody else out there that says, this is what I want to accomplish. But that's it. There's a whole science behind it that most of us don't do. So, Peter, I'm so psyched. Sorry to jump in, but I just had to get that off my chest.
Paul, I'm glad you did, because we spoke about this before we came on air. And the one thing that I did with Paul is I congratulated him on his mindset. But I want to take that to the next level, because once you've got the mindset in place, you need to have a goal set in place. People don't get that. It's the mindset now at the next level. That's your goal set. With the goal set, you develop the appropriate skill set. And with that, you then need to pull in the tool set that you need to use in order to get that mindset. Does that make sense?
Totally. Let me get to a couple of comments before we go too far. We got Ron Usher says, good day, Peter and Paul. Robert Allen Carvel, hello from Atlanta, Georgia, USA. And Michael Weldon coming into us from the West Coast. Thanks for the invite. Steve Apicella, purpose-driven goal plus relentless passion to achieve it equals results. And Kurt Von Annen, good evening, gentlemen. I was finally able to get on while you are live. Thank you.
I want to say that I'm on here, and I come on quite often to watch Paul work, and I enjoy this show more than any others. I know very little about cars. I know a fair bit about selling, and I know a fair bit of the science behind it. But every time I've tuned in to see Paul ask questions of his people, his guests, week after week, I get enthralled. And normally I don't have the time to spend an hour looking at something like this. But with you, Paul, I always put in that hour, and I enjoy every bit of it. So thank you for the content and for the variety of content you provide.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I also say something to those gentlemen that were so kind with their comments? Goal setting is an art. It's beyond the science. People don't understand this. Good selling at the top level is also an art. It's beyond the science, because it requires more than just mindset. It requires that passion. It requires that focus. It requires a vision. You can't set a goal without the focus, without the passion, without the vision either. So it doesn't matter which part of selling you're in, unless you've got the foundation right, it's not going to work for you. Now, can I just take this in any direction I want?
The floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you. Look, I want to start talking about a number of areas that people think they understand very passionately, and most people don't. I'm talking about affirmations. It's an area that people don't get right, because what they don't do is they don't work on it from an emotional standpoint. They're logical in what they do with their affirmations. Another one is visualization. Again, people don't get it. And I want to share a few things about how that works as well. But I also want to talk about a process that people say is traditional goal setting. Now, I have no idea what these people mean by saying it's traditional goal setting, because with all my research and all of the people that I've spoken to and I've trained over the years, the one thing that I find about so-called traditional sales training is there's no such thing. A lot of people that couldn't sell in the old days were brought in as sales trainers because the companies didn't want to let the best people out on the off the road as sales trainers. They needed the revenue. So the second-rate people then started sales training. And in so many companies, especially the medium-sized businesses today, that process hasn't changed in 30 or 40 years. And they're the ones that say, we teach traditional goal setting. I have no idea what they're talking about, because if you start setting goals the way that they tell you to, guess how much of that goal you're going to achieve? If you get to 60%, you'll be lucky. If you get to 70%, you're a champion. And if you're at 80%, you've worked your clacker off to try and get to that goal. Now, let me explain to you what I mean. That's an Australian term, by the way. So
I gather, because I've never heard it before.
you can use that in the States as well, because I think people understand what I'm saying. The other thing I will say, we don't have any kangaroos in the streets here in Sydney. But if you go to Canberra, where the greenies are in action over there, they're killing kangaroos 10 a night out in the streets in the middle of the city.
Wow.
They're wild, but they won't cull them. So anyway, getting away from that, let's get back to goals, because what needs to be done to get past that 60, 70 or 80%, what you have to do is to take your goals away from logic and bring the emotional aspect into them. Now, every one of us, no matter what we do in life, whatever plan we have, it's always based on logic. Now, for those that understand the selling process, if you try and sell on logic, you'll never sell a thing. Or if you do, it's going to be luck more than anything else. And I spell luck a different way, by the way. To me, luck is W-O-R-K, because the harder I work, the luckier I get. They keep telling me that all my life, right?
I've heard that, yes.
Yeah, the important thing here is that when you start setting goals that start to matter, you need to bring emotion into it. It's just like the other process that people talk about all the time, needs and wants selling. And so many people in training teach that you have to sell based on needs. Well, I'll tell you something that I learned more than 40 years ago, because in those days, to sell my sales training, I would go out on the road with the salespeople so that I could see what they're doing out on the road, and then come back to the management and say, this is what we need to train your salespeople in. And I remember going out to one call, and this poor young fellow that wasn't trained properly started saying, well, look, we need to find out what you need so I can suit that need, and then you can start making money with what I can help you with. Well, the client put his both hands on the actual on the desk, stood up and said, listen, young man, don't offend me. By you telling me what I need is offensive. I will only buy what I want. Do you understand me? And the poor kid went white, didn't know what to do. But the message I learned from there was what I wanted to teach people is about wants. And guess the story that I had from that point onward to teach people about want selling. Nobody ever buys what they need unless the doctor says you need to buy yourself a wheelchair or whatever the case may be, but you won't buy that wheelchair until you want that wheelchair. That's the difference. You want to be able to buy it before you actually buy it. The same with a car. What we need are four wheels, a body, a steering wheel, a brake, an accelerator, whatever we want. But when we want that car, we want a white car. We want a sedan. We want a 4-door or a 2-door. We want a V8 motor like I still drive today. All those wants are what are taken into account before we buy what other people tell us we need. We don't need anything. We need to buy what we want. And the minute people start to sell what the prospect wants, guess what? They start to sell more. Now, I know a little bit about that selling because for over a 30-year period, my closing rate was 92% on the first call, irrespective of product. That's a pretty high closing rate. And again, I got into the Hall of Fame, corporate Hall of Fame, with that close rate. I did it for 2 years in a row, but I was training people. I'd take them out on the road and I'd say, this is how it's done. No training in the classroom, face-to-face training. You saw me sell, you saw me write the order. Now go out and do it yourself. So that's where it all started. Now, the whole thing is everything we do in our selling process or goal setting is based on influence. We have sales managers telling us what we need to do in order to write our goals. We have our family telling us. We have our partner expecting us to write goals, and we need to show the partner the goal we wrote out. The fact that we don't achieve it is irrelevant because we have that influence in goal setting. And what we need to do is to break away from the influence and get back onto focus, because the minute we start to focus, we start to write goals.
Now let me jump in here 1 second. Kenneth Dunner Jr. says, Paul, congratulations to you, sir. Thank you, Kenneth. And Orlando O. Spencer, yes, we really need, I think he meant we really don't need anything. It's mostly about wants. So true, Peter. He says, hi, Paul, sorry I've not been on in a while. Hey, you know what? Life gets busy and we do what we can when we can. So I appreciate you taking the time to tune in tonight, Orlando. Thank you very much. And everybody else as well.
Thank you. Can I now take it to another point of contention, especially in goal setting, and that's affirmations. Most people understand that in goal setting, affirmations are crucial. Any form of selling, affirmations are crucial. But I'll guarantee that most people we're talking to today have tried affirmations. They go and read the affirmations, or they go and memorize affirmations, and 2 or 3 days later, it mentally gets too hard to work the affirmations. So what do? We drop the affirmations. When the sales start to fall away, we go back to affirmations. And it's a cycle that goes on forever. But sorry?
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. So there's a way of breaking that cycle, and it's going away from logic. Because when we start writing our affirmations, we write affirmations based on logic. But once you start learning how to work with affirmations effectively, you can actually turn that logic into emotion in a very, very simple way. Now, 2 things I want to bring up here. The minute you start to understand how to work with emotion using logic to start with, you'll start to change the way you do things. And if you can then work with your affirmations for the first 21 or 28 days, depending on what school of understanding you're working with, you then create a habit. I prefer the 28 days because that way I'm sure that I create a habit. And if you do it for 90 days, you then create a lifestyle. Now, this is so important to your goals, because if you can break past that 28 days, past the 90 days, you will set goals that you can only dream of. They'll be that powerful that you'll actually fall over yourself with all the benefits you get. So let me take you to another level, because what you need to do, it's a lot of people I've spoken with over the years, and I've written a few of these down. They say, I care about how I sell. Other people will say, well, excellent, I'm an excellent problem solver, or I drive results doing my best. Now, all of that is logical, and you can have that as affirmation for the next 2 or 3 days, and I guess you'll then fall into the same trap as everybody else. You'll stop using it because it is logic. Now, here's how to convert that partially into an emotional format. You then just bring in this one short phrase: I attract sales other sellers don't. Then the word because. I care about how I sell and how this is perceived by my prospect. What a difference to that one phrase, I care about how I sell. So you've now gone from logic to emotion. Let's go to the next one. I'm an excellent problem solver. Well, again, I attract sales other sellers don't, because I am an excellent problem solver that concentrates on what my prospect wants. See the difference? You've now emotionalized a logical phrase. And the other one, I drive results doing my best. Again, I attract sales others sellers don't, because I drive results doing my very best for my prospects and my clients.
And you're saying that 28 days is a good formula to start that habit that leads you on to the success you're looking for.
It's a habit at 28 days. You need to get it to 90 days as a lifestyle. But
Yeah.
the minute you start to emotionalize, the 28 days are doable.
Well, very doable. And I'm going to relate something to you that happened to me. I'm hooked on food. That's just the reality of my life. Everything revolves around food and fine dining. Now, you say 28 days. I've been on this, I think when I finished out my thing last night, I think it's at 45 days or something like that. So for 45 days, I've been following a rigorous plan, and I've been achieving success with it. And here's how the mind flip works, okay? So we just got off a 3-day knitting retreat. Our other business, as my wife is the Nitty Gritty Yarn Girl on Facebook. So we had a 3-day retreat at a resort and spa where people came in from all over the country to spend time there. The food was wonderful. And my wife said, you know, do you want to stay for the brunch? Now, ordinarily, I would have torn that brunch up, okay? But in my mind, I'm trying to come up with reasons to not stay for the brunch, because as delicious as it was, I've been for 45 days following a specific plan that's yielding exact results that I'm looking for. And the reason I didn't want to stay for the brunch is because I wanted to get back to my new normal eating plan to stay on track with what I've been doing for the last 45 days. So that 28-day thing, yeah, it becomes addictive, and I can't wait to be at the 90-day, because I think that is going to transform into a whole nother lifestyle.
It will. At 90 days, things will change to such an extent that lifestyle will never change. And people don't realize how powerful it is. The same thing, the same people over the years that I've taught about setting goals and setting business plans and the like, they never go back to the old. Now, I want to bring up another product, which I don't have, but I've used. And here in Australia, we call it the Man Shake. And it became so popular, they now have a woman's version called the Woman Shake. Now, let me explain to you what the Man Shake is. It's a product developed for those men that love to drink their beer, because the biggest problem with drinking excessive amounts of beer is you end up with a belly you shouldn't have, and the body gets very distorted. Now, the Man Shake is currently advertising on television, telling people how this man lost 80 kilos but still drinks beer. And it's by using this process called the Man Shake. And one after another. I also know a hypnotist that helped me along the way, which I'll talk about shortly. But that same hypnotist hypnotized a man that the medical profession couldn't help. He weighed over 350 kilos. They had to get him out of the house by taking out a window.
Wow.
Right, so that gives you an idea of how big this man was. He ended up at my friend's farm. He's got a retreat, and he now weighs something like about 55 kilos.
Wow.
Only a 300 kilo loss. But that friend of mine also hypnotized me when it comes to visualization. I'll talk about that shortly, because that is something that, again, most people can't do in selling. They know about visualization, but to actually get the visualization working for you is something beyond most people's comprehension. Now, we're taught to visualize with our eyes closed. That may not be the best thing to do when you're driving a car, because that's where I do most of my visualization these days. And I do it with flashes coming up in front of me that help me see what I want to visualize. When I'm in a call, the same thing will happen. I can actually see banners come up in front of me that I can then relate back to my prospect. Now, this is all done involuntarily because it's been stored in my subconscious mind for so many years. I then start to recall involuntarily, but it's helped me with my selling no end. Now, let me explain to you how it works, because here's where the crux comes in. First up, when you visualize, everybody says, go into a quiet place at night, close your eyes and start to visualize. No, you need to go beyond that. Go into that quiet place at night, but now create a movie screen of what you want to visualize. Because unless you can see it in vivid color, you're not visualizing. So if you want $200,000 or $300,000 in income next year, guess what? Visualize $200,000 or $300,000 in dollars. And we don't have $1,000 notes here in Australia like you do in America. We only go for $100 note maximum. But if you can then look at a wheelbarrow full of $100 notes, you've now got $500,000 sitting in that wheelbarrow. That's a lot easier to visualize than $500,000 any other way. And
Right.
then if you start to visualize properly, you start to bring in the senses: sight, sound, touch, feel, and taste. Because unless you can feel the money, you can't visualize it. Unless you can see the money, you can't visualize it. Unless you can actually put your finger on it, rub it over the note, then back into your mouth, you won't taste it. So the five senses are so crucial in whatever you visualize. That's important. But you then, once you visualize, now start to live the goal. You see, now your visualization goes into you seeing the house you want. Well, go and take a photograph of you in front of a house similar and make it your home. Seeing the car you want. Now, in the car industry, you do this all the time. People have goals to buy a car. Ask them what color, ask them what model, what make. Now, take them straight to the car and guess what? They've fallen in love with it.
Right.
It's visualization at work in reverse, because now you're there at the coalface, not just visualizing, but you're actually living the dream. And that's
They're painting the picture in their minds when they're in the car. They're painting the picture for themselves, where they're going, what's that first trip they're going to, who's the first neighbor that's going to compliment them on their new car, or the family member, or the next event they go to. So they're painting that picture while they're sitting there immersed in it, as opposed to a picture of a car. It's a whole nother way to look at it.
Paul, what would a good salesperson do? They'd ask the appropriate questions to put that person in that picture.
Right.
Ask them what the neighbor would think with this new car. Ask them what their family would think. Which kids would sit which side of the back, right or left. You know, all these little things which then bring it into reality is what the visualization is all about.
Right.
See, visualization is only good if it's in the now. Not in the future,
Right.
not in the past. It's not visualization. But if you talk about the now, their mind can translate 3 months ahead when they can afford it. Their
Right.
mind can translate into next week when they take delivery of that car. I think now it's 6 months before you get delivery too. It's crazy.
After that, it's interesting you said so many months from now until they can afford it. Oh, let me just read Orlando's comment. He says, I am now learning that the logic that I claim to have comes from first my emotions, and then I use my logic to justify what I'm feeling. Therefore, these days, I first start with my emotions and then try to understand the emotions of my prospects and clients.
I would say this to Orlando. The selling process works this way. You sell based on emotion, and then you ratify the sale with logic. It's your confirmation that you've bought. Try it any other way, it won't work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
It's the ratification or the verification of your purchase with logic. The only time you need to bring in logic, and if you don't bring the logic in, the emotion doesn't have the same bite.
And let me add to, so I was going to say a little bit more. When you said, so that they say a few months from now when they can afford it, let me tell you about when they can afford it. Okay, sure. I remember a few years back, this customer, their Lexus RX 300 was coming off lease, and the RX 330 was a bit more costly. Okay, and everybody's fear was, well, you know, it's a lot more money than the 300 was. And this customer that was turning in their lease said, I'm at $350 a month. No, they were at like 3 1/4. They said, we can go $350. That's it. Not a penny more. Pat said, don't listen to them. Just take them out to the car. Take them out to the new one. They can appreciate, they loved what they had. They appreciate what that was. They will appreciate what this is. And after spending time with them, and this guy, Pat Matera, was master closer, this guy, we spot delivered that car to that couple that same afternoon at $650 per month. And they were both smiling and happy going out the door in the car they said they would not go over $350 for.
That's fantastic. Now, look, let me say something. I can only personalize that. First up, I buy my cars for cash. So I don't understand this paying off stuff. It's obviously a very good selling tool, but it's something foreign to me. Secondly, for the last 20 years, guess what I've driven? Lexus. I've had 6 Lexus during that 20-year period. It's my preferred car. I used to be a top-end Mercedes driver, and then I converted to a Lexus. I used to drive LTDs, all sorts of top-end cars all my life. And guess what? I'm a sold Lexus driver, and I'm committed to Lexus. So I can understand where you're coming from. The other thing, when it comes to preference in any type of vehicle, again, it's not logic. Right. It's emotion at the top end, because now we're bringing emotion into a different level.
How does it make you feel?
Yes. But we can go to the level above that level if you want, because the minute you start bringing things in emotionally at a new level, you then start bringing ego into play. And when you have ego involved with emotion, these people will jump over your desk just to sign the paperwork. You know what I'm talking about. It's that powerful. And a lot of people in sales don't like working with ego, because to them it's foreign. It's not. It's not foreign to your prospect or your customer. So why should it be foreign to you? Can I keep going on that same level?
Yes.
Okay. Let's take it up another notch, and let's start talking about goal setting at a level everybody can understand, but again, very few people use. We've all heard about goal boards.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask for people to put their hands up that has goal boards, because it goes beyond goal boards, because you go into goal boards, vision boards, target boards, progressive goal boards, money goal boards, action goal boards. And if you've only reduced yourself or kept yourself to one form of goal board, you're doing yourself an injustice. Because if you're a manager in your office, you should have multiple goal boards for money, people goal boards, vision goal boards, all those. And I used to love the target goal boards. You write this little thing that looks like a target, and it's in red on the outside, red on the inside, just like the big Target stores, right? And inside that, you put your number of sales you want to make inside for that month. Or you put a percentage inside on the inside of that. Like when I was doing the 40%, everywhere you looked around my office, in the car, inside my briefcase, there'd be a circle with a 40 in the middle. That gave me the 40% I was looking for. And I never lost that, because everything I came close to had the 40%. My bathroom mirror, my bedroom mirror, in my lounge room, on the TV set, everywhere I went. I traveled to the country, and again, I'd have these targets all over the place, right down to the actual door handle as I'd walked out of the motel room. So you can never overdo it. And the more you do it, the more likely you are to be remembering what you should be getting to. Now, if you start mixing that with visual goal boards, like a car or a house or whatever, that's an extra goal board with a different target. Then you start putting together the different types of money goal boards and the action goal boards. Every one of these are important. And the more you bring in other people, the more accountable you become to your goal. So if you've got your wife, you've got your kids involved, guess who's going to drive you? If you've got your sales manager involved, there's an obligation from the sales manager to drive you. But if you then personalize everything, there's no need for anybody to drive you. When they do drive you, that's the extra push that you need to get to where you're going. Targets can only be achieved when you have a target.
Let me jump to a couple of comments real quickly. Orlando says, thank you, Peter, for the previous statement. And Kurt Van Anen says, emotion and a focus on the relationship over the transaction is key. If the relationship is right, the transaction becomes automatic. And this is something that is 100% spot on, and that's something that Steve Epicella talks about quite frequently.
Look, I have a passion away from everything else that I do. And in every one of my rooms, I have guitars. And my passion now is I have the largest private collection of guitars in Australia. And a lot of very expensive guitars. I don't play. I stopped playing 40 years ago. And the reason being, my arthritis is that bad. I try, but it's too painful.
Okay.
It doesn't stop me from collecting a passion. And when people say, I've got a guitar that I think you need to look at, and they want too much money, I'm happy to sit down and negotiate till we're both happy. Because normally when they want something, it's above what they should be charging, and it's above what I'm prepared to pay. So when you get to that happy medium, everybody wins. And the same should be happening when you're selling. Get to that happy medium. Now, I want to take you to another level in selling as well, because in my more advanced form of goal setting, I take people to 3 platforms. The first platform is the written goal. Now, most people can write a goal, but they don't write the goal effectively. When you start writing the goal, to write it effectively, rewrite it, read it. Nope, improve on it, then go back and keep on improving on it. If you keep on improving on that goal, you then end up with something closer to what you're looking for in a goal. It then starts to become a business plan. And the minute you create that, you know what you do? You start to overachieve. Now, how many people do you know that can overachieve in their goals?
Very few.
Most of my friends at the top end, I call them super sellers. I registered that word, by the way, because I believe it's so powerful in terms of what people do when they're selling. A super seller is at that level. A seller is at that level somewhere. So there's a big difference between the two. But the way that a super seller writes the goal, they're going to achieve it because they will overachieve first mentally before they overachieve physically. Once you get to that level, I've got a friend that I talked about with you off camera, I think, that sets that writes his goal out 100 times. That's a second level. That's his prerequisite. And he will write the goal, then improve on that goal 100 times. It might take him a week, it might take him two, because he reads and then rewrites and reads and rewrites. I then suggest you do what he does. He stops for about a week and then rewrites that goal another 20 times, then stops another week, rewrites that goal another 20 times. Now, people say, who in their right mind would take that goal and write it 100, 150 times over and over? The person that's going to achieve $1 million, because that's what his goal target is. Most people won't do that. And the reason they don't do that is it's too much work. And what did I say right at the very beginning? The things that I'm going to share with you, everybody can do. Not many people are prepared to go to that extent.
Right.
So here he is writing the goal 100 times, and guess how much he achieves. He gets his goal, but here's the best part. He overachieves it. And what most people would spend 12 months working on a goal over, he'll achieve it in 8 or 9 months. And go beyond that. So if you want to start achieving goals at that level, put the hours in, put the work in, and then work on a checklist, making sure you understand what's happening over and over again. And the third method that I teach as a platform is Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. Now, a lot of people know about the book. A lot of people have read the book. Not many understand the content of the book and what Napoleon Hill meant by what he said about what he does. And I spend hours and hours. In fact, on my second video, which goes for 3 hours, I devote more than an hour to Napoleon Hill and his goal-setting method, which is the best one I've ever come across. It's the one that got me started back in 1975 when I first started writing high-end goals. And I've never stopped that process all the way through. But for the very first time, I'm talking about it publicly. Most people didn't know what I did. In fact, I had 2 mentors in my life that pressed me to understand my process. And I said, I'll teach it to you, providing you don't share it with anybody. And I'm sure both went to the grave not sharing it with anyone. So here it is. It's now starting to unfold. But if you go back to Napoleon Hill and start working with what he says, you'll find that your level of understanding goes from there to there. It's that simple. And that's what you need when you start writing goals. Now, if I'm overshooting what people can actually comprehend at the moment, I'm happy to slow down if you're happy to start asking questions, because I know at that level, when you start talking about the foundation and blueprints required, you're talking at a level most people have never heard of. You know, I speak to a lot of people in sales, and they think if they can get to $1 or $2 or $300,000 in their selling, they're over the moon because they've achieved more than they ever will. When you overshoot that goal, you're then likely to pick up 50%. So if you write a goal for 300,000 and you're diligent about it, you're more than likely to write $150,000, and that's something most people will never achieve. But I'm talking about knowing the process so that you can now start to achieve $1, $2, and more million in the same period of time, because you know what the platform is and what your focus is. Now, that's frightening to a lot of people, Paul.
Well, so yeah, it's mental. You have to take mental ownership, and you have to really build. You know, it's not just I want to achieve this. It's No, you have to constantly refine it until you've really so well defined what it is that you have the building blocks to make that a reality.
You know, I want to bring in one more thing, and again, totally misunderstood by not only everybody in sales, but everybody in business. The law of attraction. And everybody I speak to has got their own opinion on the law of attraction, and 99% of people have not only got it wrong, but it got it badly wrong. Now, when I first started learning about the law of attraction, I think I heard Bob Proctor talk about it more than 40 years ago. Now, if you don't know who Bob Proctor is, he actually worked for Earl Nightingale for around about 10 years. And Earl Nightingale taught him a heck of a lot, and he eventually had no choice but to go out on his own because of so many people were coming to Earl Nightingale's office saying, we want this guy to teach us. So poor old Bob had to move into the teaching industry, and he's done brilliantly ever since. But he talked about the law of attraction, and I think in those days he was pretty well mixed into the New Age movement, as were a lot of other people, and they all talked about the law of attraction. But what he talked about made a lot of sense. And there was another guy called Tony Robbins that also talked a lot about the law of attraction, and what he talks about makes a lot of sense because both of them are purists. I talk to a lot of people in the New Age movement that have taken something good and then personalized it to the point nobody can understand what they're talking about. Then they go out and say, this is my law of attraction. Yeah, doesn't work for anybody else either, so it won't work for you. The reality is, when I first got hold of this, I was going to a church that had its main pastor come from Orlando, Florida, where he was a dean of the biggest Bible school in America, came back to Melbourne, Australia, where I was living at the time, and he ended up teaching or becoming the pastor at that church, and I got to know him quite well. So in my weekly visit, I'd turn up and I'd say, I don't get this thing called the law of attraction. Do you know anything about it? And he says, what do you want to know? I said, well, do you know something about it? He said, I can lead you to over 200 scriptures that talk about the law of attraction in the Bible. It's all Bible-based. People that know nothing about the Bible are then using the Bible to teach something which is biblical. Show me. And I started learning. Do you know, I found over 500 scriptures on the law of attraction in the Bible. That's how powerful it is. And law of attraction comes up more frequently than just about any other subject. And the biggest subject that you find anywhere in the Bible is based on finance and goal setting.
Interesting.
People don't realize it. Yep. There are 2,700 scriptures on finance. If you want to start pulling out scriptures on faith, you'll get 300. If you want to take scriptures out dealing with God, we're talking 500. So we're talking 2,700 as opposed to a few hundred by comparison. People don't know the wealth in the Bible when it comes to understanding how much money you should be making. And if you go into the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, 1 in every 10 verses are about finance or money. Jesus talked about that more than any other subject by far. So there's something that'll rock you a little if it hasn't already, because that's where it's at. And there are so many anomalies in life, people don't know where they come from. Now, you can have people like Bob Proctor and Tony Robbins then talk about another subject called tithing. And for a lot of people that don't understand tithing, it's a Christian term in the churches where you give 10% of your income voluntarily before tax, and that becomes your tithe. Now, Tony Robbins says the hardest thing I ever had to do was to write my tithing out when my tithing started exceeding $1 million at a time. Can you imagine? Now you got to write out a tithe, 10% of your income, and it's way over $1 million. Not many people can imagine it, let alone do it. And Tony does it all the time.
Kurt Von Annen says you have not because you ask not. James 4:3.
There you go. Keep bringing up the scriptures because it keeps on going from there. Actually, I, not that long back, started getting into the Beatitudes. Knocking you shall see, seeking you shall find. Knocking the door shall be open to you. You know, the interesting thing is I then spend 15 minutes explaining what that means biblically to the salespeople. Because there's so much wisdom in just that one phrase. Salespeople, once they get hold of it, their selling changes forever. Because the knocking part is you going out there and looking for business. It's your getting out and processing things that you need to process. The seeking part, again, is looking for that business, but also I equate that into getting referrals. Business does not exist for the sake of selling. Business exists for the sake of sharing. And that's what referrals are all about. Everybody shares with each other and everybody benefits. If you're going to refer somebody to me, you're going to get a lot of joy with your friend buying from me. And if they don't, you'll probably come back to me and find out or want to ask why they didn't buy, because that was, as far as you were concerned, somebody that should have bought, and it would have done them the world of good if they did. So all of that equates, and it's no different to your industry, to any other industry. If you don't get the wheels in motion, nothing much happens.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
You know, the thing is, every time you set a goal, they should be focus-based. But most people will set goals that are fear-based. If I don't set a goal, and I'll give you the rest of that sentence that'll explain why they're not setting goals, but what's wrong with setting goals. And I've never had situations where I start talking to people that make any sense, because all of a sudden people veer off on different tangents talking about goals that they didn't get, they should have got, or they couldn't be bothered getting, or other people are cheating getting goals. Well, I don't understand how that works, but this is the conversations that I keep on having. Now you're nodding there, Paul. Have you got?
No, that's you get me to look at things in a little bit different way than I've looked at them. I thought I had a good understanding of it, but apparently there's so much more to it that I'm realizing that this has been extremely informative, and it's getting me to look at things in a different way than I'm used to looking at them.
You know, I thank you for saying that, because I always tell people, and this is most of the time that I do my sales training, whatever you learn from me, I hope you've been taking notes, because if you haven't, there's a lot you're going to guess. So my recommendation is do the replay on what you've seen here with pen and paper in hand. Now, the very first time that I got serious about working with Think and Grow Rich is I had a managing director in Melbourne, Australia, challenge me to actually go and look at Think and Grow Rich. Now, I thought that book was a nice book for me to read. It really wasn't for me because it didn't have anything relative for me. I then went and saw a video by Earl Nightingale, and it was called The Stranger's Secret. Now, I not only watched that video, it was in 16mm film, by the way, back in the 1970s, right? That I saw.
Was it on a wheel?
Reel to reel, yep. And I had to keep on hiring reel-to-reel projectors because that size wasn't domestic. We're talking commercial size, 16mm. And the first time I watched Earl Nightingale and The Stranger's Secret, I must have watched it at least 15 or 20 times in a day. A 30-minute video. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I had to go over it and over it and over it. I took copious amounts of notes. And when my managing director says, I've got to go and read Think and Grow Rich, I then decided I was going to read it and read it properly. I'm a fast reader. So I disappeared with Think and Grow Rich as a book and a notepad. Now, I'm talking about a legal pad in American speak. And I soon filled that up. Then I filled up a second one. Then I filled up a third one. This is a long weekend. I got 3 days to absorb this. And I just kept on filling up these legal pads with information. I walked out of that premises after 3 days, an absolute change, man. What I saw in Think and Grow Rich blew me out of the window. I'd never read so much wisdom in my life, but that was the first time I read it with a purpose. Now, I was given a purpose by my managing director as what I should look for. And when I started seeing what he was talking about, we had a totally different book. Now, I'm suggesting that you go and get Think and Grow Rich, but look for the purpose behind it. It's a money-making book, and it always has been. But the interesting thing is, with the amount of people that Napoleon Hill interviewed to get that book together, some 200 people, he actually wrote the book with a purpose in mind, and very few people have understood the purpose. And I'm suggesting that every one of us goes out, rereads it again, looking for the money magnet within the pages of that book. You'll be pleasantly surprised when you do.
Yeah, I'm going to get another copy of that.
Well, I don't know how many copies I've got through. Bob Proctor is an interesting character because I saw an interview with him quite some time back where he actually has a little book reader that he keeps open. And he's been reading Think and Grow Rich now for 60 years, page by page, paragraph by paragraph. And he's got this reader that he opens at a specific page, and he won't move to the next page until both his spirit and his mind have understood the content. 60 years he's been reading this one book, looking for more and more wisdom within the content. Now, if it's good enough for Bob Proctor to do that, with all of his understanding and his learning, I think it's good enough for all of us to be able to do that as well.
Oh, I agree, 1,000%.
How are we going for time? I think we're about out, aren't we?
We're doing good. We're down to the final 3.
Okay.
This has been so informative.
Paul, do you want to wrap this up on behalf of everybody? Or do you want me to do that?
You do it. I've so enjoyed everything that you brought here tonight.
Thank you.
It really, it's helped me realize some of the changes that I've made, not realizing how I made them, but it's also it's opened me up to looking at things a little bit differently than I would have ordinarily looked at it. So I've absorbed information on 2 different levels here tonight. And I can't thank you enough. It's far exceeded my expectations. I knew it would be good, but I didn't know it would be this good.
Well, as I said to you before we actually started the program today, I can share 4 or 5 hours on this subject alone. That's how much work I've done on it. But I think the important thing for everybody here, I've tried to cover as much as I possibly can in a shortest period of time that I can without going into too much depth. And the only way you're going to get into more depth is, again, get hold of a copy of this and just play it over and over, because you'll get a message behind the message. This is something I learned 50 years ago. The minute you start on a project, don't just do it once. Every time you go over it again, you'll get more wisdom coming out of the pages or out of the notes or out of something. And the more you do it, the more you grow. And the most important thing is, I had a mentor of mine who unfortunately passed away a little bit too early. And he was smart enough to have his wake before he passed on. Yeah, just
before he died?
Yeah. And he paid for it all. 300 people in a bar.
Wow.
Best wake I've ever been on. guy called Brian Price. And Brian always had this concept that he worked on. He said, look, whenever I get a revelation, the first thing I do is I hold it out there. And I just leave it there until I can get some knowledge behind it. Now, sometimes I have to throw it away because I realize it's of no value. Other times I then go searching for more knowledge while my hands are now waiting to pick up more information. And if you start doing that in everything you do in life, you will grow at a level which you will not believe possible. Your wisdom level will go to extremes, and I mean absolute extremes, because the minute you start to look for things, you'll find them. It's the old process of Matthew 7:7. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened to you. Because he that looks and he that knocks will always find. And here we go. It's up to you to do what I've started. All I can do is put the platform down. It's up to you now to make that platform you and yours personally.
Peter, thank you so much for spending your Sunday night with us. This, like I said, it's been extremely informative, enjoyable, and we could talk for hours if we had the time, but the time has come and gone, and every week the hour seems to go faster than the 60-minute that it's supposed to be. So,
Paul,
Peter, thank you again.
You get it at your end, but us, we normal people, have to watch it at our end, and we find the hour disappears just as quickly.
Yes, it does. So everybody that tuned in tonight, thank you very much. I appreciate it. If you know anyone that would benefit from this, please share the broadcast with them. I hope you have a safe and successful week coming up, and we'll see you next week on Sunday Night Live.